Okay, can you see my slide?
Yes, Don.
Okay, unfortunately, this is what I say at every single meeting I have, which is many, many meetings. But okay, yeah, I think when ironically the first when Sean texted me about sharing, right, the first thing that I thought about was actually time. Yeah, whether I have time to prepare for this sharing, as well as in that sense whether it was how I wanted to spend my time. Yeah, because I think I mean hearing from all of you share, like all of you are also working, right? So naturally, when we spend so much of our time at work, then you also feel like you have a lot less to work with. Like you are planning with a lot less flexibility as when you were studying as well. Yeah, and for myself, I think like uh, I'm not sure whether Kevin will agree, but I think generally when you work for the government, right, they work you very hard. Yeah. And uh, they work you very hard and they also allow people who don't do work to also continue working. So unfortunately, workload is quite heavy. Yeah. So I think for myself, yeah, I really was thinking, whether it would be the right time and a good time to be able to share. But I think, yeah, I guess as it is, it's always a privilege when God calls. And I think time is also something that I have been thinking a lot about, especially I think as I have been working for a few years already. Yeah, okay, so I'll just go into it. I just share with you a bit about my background. So for myself, I graduated from NS in 2017, sorry. Yeah, and I did psychology and social work. Yeah, and then since then, I've spent my career mainly at NLB. Yeah, with a short stint about 6 months where I was posted out. So I did attachment at a UX kind of design studio. Yeah, but for now, I mainly do I'm involved in what we call experience design, but basically I plan libraries and how our staff as well as our users use our libraries. So whenever there's a new library, it'll be my team that is working on it, and then we project manage. So we liaise with like architects, we liaise with our consultants to design the space, and also all our users to make sure that we actually help them like visualize the kind of end product that you'll see with the library. So if you do like our libraries, I hope you've been visiting. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of people in this kind of age group. But I mean, if you've been going to your libraries, then yeah, it's generally the work of my team that designs the space. Yeah. So I think when I was thinking a lot about time and what it and how we see time, I think the first thing that we always think about is like also stewardship, seeing time as a resource, right? And the need to also give an account for how we spend the time. And I think, at least for myself, because I'm a psych, my background's in psych, right? So when you're a psych major during uni, you also do a lot of like different experiments. Already you have to participate, you have to be the guinea pig to participate in the experiment. So I actually remember there's quite a few experiments that are actually about time perception. So how it goes is like you hear a beep, and then after that you're asked to like kind of guess, estimate how long has passed. And of course that there'll be a lot of different variables that they also try to test. But the general sense is that us as people, right, we're not very good at time perception. We don't have a very good sense of how it passes, and we also don't have a very good ability to plan. So I don't know if but at least I hear from you all, it seems quite similar. You like, oh, we decide, okay, I don't watch YouTube for a while, then you watch, then suddenly, like all this time passed, don't know. Or like, yeah, you start playing a game, and then, yeah, all this, yeah, you just say, okay, I commit to about 5 minutes, and then you don't really, you're unable to really keep track of how the time passes. And I think, I mean, of course, there's that sense that, yeah, we are not very good at it. But also, this need to then recognize that time is quite a unique resource, and it can't be allocated the same way. So in the last week prior to this sharing, I was just thinking back. I mean, quite similar to what Sean was asking us to share about. But I was thinking about, how I had spent the various days of my week and what I was doing. And I realized that when I mean account, it's like, okay, I specifically know like, okay, I set aside this time to do this thing, right? But then beyond that, I realized that more than 50% of my time, I actually like couldn't account for it. Like I realized that the time had passed, but I wasn't very cognizant of how I spent it. It wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna do this. It was just more like, okay, I plop down and sit there, and then suddenly like, oh, 3 hours later, like, okay, I need to go to sleep. Or like you don't really, or the things just happen quite incidentally lah. And I think that's where like you realize that time, while a resource, it's not something that you can easily allocate the same way you will allocate, like say, money, and how you budget how much you're going to spend. But time just kind of passes incidentally lah, and it is like you don't consciously make the decision, but the time passes. So it's like you are deciding at every step of the way, but it just passes you lah. Yeah, and I think like noting these two factors, something that I always think about was then how it's even more important to be very intentional with how we spend our time. Yeah. So I often think of how we apportion our time like a plate. Yeah. So I even when I was in uni, and even prior to that, I always have this piece of paper which I write down, and I call it what's on my plate. So I basically write all the things that are basically how I spend my time, whether it's school, whether it's like ministry, whether it's like just my hobbies, my life. And then I will like write it all down, and I'll see, okay, like, how's my time being allocated? And I think like, I think the difference between now and say like when you're a student, I'm not sure, maybe some of you haven't worked for that long, so it's not so apparent. But I think for me, what I really realize is that while it's true that we have less time because a lot of it's taken up by work and you don't have that flexibility to plan, one thing is that you actually do have a lot more choice. So I see it in terms of, this kind of like kiddie plates where you have the different compartments. Like when you are now a working individual, these compartments are less clear. In the past, you're like, okay, people will spend time in like, their CCA, they're studying, their prep work and everything. And then now it's like there's so much variation, like depending on your job, your hours could be different, or depending on your passions. Like some I know some friends who spend all their time like just I guess not just, but like, they decide that it's about resting. So you watch a lot of Netflix, watch shows. I have some friends who are all about like learning, go for general assembly course, do Coursera, then like, go extra classes. And I mean, there is a lot of variation in what people choose to spend their time doing. Yeah, but I think it's really about like choosing wisely and being aware of those choices. And also I think recognizing what we need, what we prioritize changes depending on the seasons that we're in. So I think when I first started work, I was very, very, very overworked. And I think, I'm not sure if you all can relate to this, but when I started work, because I was also serving my bond, so I think there's this sense about like kind of proving your worth, like trying to tell help myself realize, like what am I capable of, like, and also this desire to excel, and with also this knowledge that, God calls for us to also excel in our workplace and give our best. So I think that unfortunately translated to very, very like unnecessary like overworking and like working a lot of hours, and I really didn't have time to do anything else beyond like recuperate, which often was like watching shows, because you just need very, very passive form of relaxation. Yeah, and like just or just like meeting up with people. So I didn't really manage to do anything else beyond that. Yeah, but I think as the years have passed, not that many years, but as over time, you kind of get a better sense of like how to manage things. And then you also realize that you can have opportunity to do other things as well. So I think it's also recognizing that, yeah, it's not all at once. And this journey of working and also planning our life, right, is something that happens throughout our life. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and also with like, if you start entering a different stage of life, then these priorities will also change. The next one I learned is also really, really drawing boundaries. I think if you are from an environment which is a bit like, the culture might be quite chiong and has a lot of like a lot of requirements. So like in the civil service, at least in where we come from, there's this term called the curse of the competent. they call it a curse because basically when you're shown that you can do work, right, naturally you get more work. And not the best, but my boss has this line he'll say, oh, this one very important, so cannot let other people do, or like, oh, I don't really trust other people to do, so that's why we need to handle it ourselves, which is like, I mean, in long story short, it means you do work well, so please do more work. Yeah, so I think sometimes when you come from a kind of like background and culture which this is quite the norm, right? Then I think it's really where you have to be very cautious of like drawing boundaries and being wary of spillover effects. Yeah, so when I first started work, I remember I really just like worked a lot and I pumped in a lot of hours. And then I was taking the MRT ride home with my brother on like one day, and then he was just commenting and asking me like how I felt towards work. And then he said he was sharing that he actually felt like I had been very like a lot more impatient and a lot more grumpy, and like in that it was like often it was being directed at my family. Yeah, and then he said that, and he basically told me that, oh, he brought it up because he felt like he knew that I was someone who valued my relationships with my family a lot, but that was really what was happening. Yeah. So I think that's when I realized that, yeah, it's true that there are a lot of spillover effects, like how we feel towards work naturally spills over to our personal time. And I think that likewise also how we spend our personal time, if you are someone who watches shows. I mean, I watch like Korean dramas and variety, so I also binge. And then then the next day you're like, oh my, I made such bad decisions, and then you're super tired the next day. So I think there's always this spillover effects, but sometimes drawing boundaries is also to guard so that we can make sure that when in the environment and the time that we're in, we're able to give our best. Yeah, and one like analogy like my brother, as he was telling me this, he was bringing up was that of an exam. And he was saying that, like, when you have an exam to do, right, after the 3 hours, right, you just have to give the paper up. Like, you have to hand it up. You cannot say like, actually, if you give me like an hour more, I'll be able to do this additional 20% that I think would make it really, really good. And I think that is how like I often saw my work. Like, it's a bit more time, but a bit more would make it better, and that was how I wanted to see. So it's really needing to be wary of that. Yeah, and the next one is also like, then in that sense, carving out space for yourself to be refreshed. Yeah, so I thought I would share, like, yeah, because I thought I have like quite a lot of hobbies. So I think one of my hobbies is actually like pottery. So I started pottery, I think about 2 years before, I would say before the COVID hype. So that was I was quite thankful for that. But I think why I saw having a hobby like pottery to be very, very important was that I think, especially if you, not that many of you work from home, but for myself, when I work from home, I think there's a tendency to feel like work is just your world, like it's just there all the time. Yeah, so being able to take yourself out of it is really, really useful. Yeah, and I think that often whatever you do is also about being able to see what God has to teach you in everything. So for myself, I realized beyond it being a hobby and beyond enjoying what I do, pottery has also taught me a lot of lessons about like what it means for God to be the potter and us to be clay, for us to be the one that's being shaped. And if you see this process, right, for pottery, I think how it differs from other hobbies is, to some extent, there are also a lot of stages. So like we have to prepare the clay, and then and every stage of the process actually affects the outcome extremely heavily. So this step that you see in the middle, which is called wedging, it's basically how you prepare the clay, and you try to get rid of air bubbles and you make it uniform. So it's like, if you do this properly, your clay is a lot easier to work with. Yeah, and then when you throw, it's also important that you center the clay well. So if you have air bubbles, you don't throw properly, you will end up having difficulty trimming, which is the next stage. You cannot trim because your piece is not centered. And then in the next stage, after you fire, which is when it goes into the kiln, then if you didn't wedge it properly, you have air bubbles, and these air bubbles basically expand when heated, and then your piece can crack. Yeah, so I think it's this sense that actually every stage of the process is not something that you can rush through. And also this idea that it's also there's a certain level of unpredictability with it, because you can do the right stages and you can do the process right, but just going through the process often cannot always guarantee an outcome of how the thing turns out. And I think that for me, it's also lessons in that, that of knowing how to let go, knowing how to surrender things to God, knowing how to recognize that as much as we invest in things, right, we can't always guarantee the outcome. Yeah, so I would say that, I mean, not to say that everyone should get a hobby, though I do really think that, having something outside work is useful, but just giving yourself the chance and opportunity to see what God has to teach in the time that you have, and what you invest your time doing. So the next point is basically about planning for margins. So margins, I think this is the concept that I picked up from this book called Crazy Busy. So basically, a margin is the space between our load and our limits. Basically, this gap that we have between what all the time that we have and what we need to do. And I think I realized for myself that I plan for very little margin. Often I even plan for reverse margins, like you pack the time so much, right, that you expect, that maybe instead of usually this task takes 2 hours, but maybe I think if I'm super efficient, I can do it in 1.5 hours. And then you pack your time so much, yeah. And I think sometimes when you do that, right, you end up not being able to seize opportunities that God might actually give you. So when I was I used to stay on campus. So I remember one time I had one of my friends, she kind of approached me and she literally told me, she wanted to talk to me. So I was very puzzled because we weren't very close. But she asked to meet me. So I was like, okay, I thought it was quite rare that someone randomly asked you. So it turns out she actually wanted to speak to me because she needed some support with her grandparent passing away. And I think while I did make time for her, I realized that as I was talking to her, I was also subconsciously thinking about all the things that I already had set my mind to do during that period of time that I was talking to her. So it felt like, as I talk to you, but my mind is subconsciously thinking of all the things that I was supposed to do. And I realized that that's why actually it's important that we keep this time to be able to be available to respond accordingly when we get these kind of opportunities that often I think as a Christian, sometimes these are really God given to give us opportunities to show love to the people around us as well. And planning for margins also allow us to be more generous with our time when it comes instead of being very, very stingy, which I think I feel like sometimes I have the tendency to do, especially when you, like yourselves, you don't have many hours after work to actually have for yourself. Sometimes you really want to gut that. Okay, so I think that's actually about all I have to share today. I think I just wanted to end off with this idea about also giving yourself time. I think as fresh grads, new working adults, there are always a lot of things to adjust to. The fact that you now have so little flexibility, or the fact that there's a lot of expectations about work, or sometimes it's even things related to adulting, needing to plan for how you spend your money and all that. I think that there are many things, so it's also about, I think, giving yourself time to ease into it and recognize that thing as God wills also, there are seasons for everything. So it's not to rush into things or always feel like you need to, in that sense, account or rather not account for the time. I mean, there's always a need to account for the time, but I think it's also like being mindful that you are making decisions on how to spend your time, and you don't always need to explain it to everyone, because all of us have a different life script in that sense of how we kind of do things and how you see things. And I think God's plan for all of us are also different. Yeah. So that's all for my sharing. Sean, I think you asked me to do some share some discussion questions also, right? So do I share some questions now?
Yeah, you can just say later I'll consolidate together with Kevin's, but you can still just mention the questions.
Okay, can, yeah. But anyway, yeah, so I was just thinking, if you're thinking about it, right, it's really to ask yourself, how you usually make decisions about how you spend your time and whether you're experiencing any negative spillover effects, as well as how you can plan margins for your week. Yeah, so you can think about it later. Okay, yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks so much, Don. Okay, let's just chill first. 2 minutes to let Don's nice voice wash over you and her thoughts. Okay, and then we let Kevin start.
Okay, sorry. After I hear Don, I'm very stressed. So I yeah, actually maybe there is a need to share what we are saying, because actually when Don was sharing, there's a lot of overlap I felt actually, and perhaps that is indicative of maybe it's a good thing in the sense that it's indicative of how these are the common issues that we'll face and I think the approaches that we take something for us to think about. So because of the overlaps, I will not take as much time, but I will share what I can and yes. Yeah. Okay, so I think for me, I was also wondering what Sean was doing asking me. Like, why in the world would you ask me when I'm like hardly a role model for this? So what I will bring to the table is a little bit more years of experience in terms of the life I've gone through, and I guess also is the wisdom that I've also gleaned from people I guess. Yeah, so I don't speak as a role model because I don't think I am, but yeah, I think there are some experiences and therefore some principles that I feel might be helpful for us to take away, right? And so I think the first thing to go to is to think about what people actually say about time. This is common in Singapore society because of the way our structure of time, our structure of life works. Everything is very fast paced. We're very busy. See, I work 12-hour days. Some of you don't even claim to have an end of work time, right? So it's the way things are structured, right? That makes you always feel like I never have enough time, right? And if you think about time, and I do this I'm just to be very clear here, I'm not making I'm not making a judgment here. I'm making an observation of how we talk about time, because I do this too, right? We talk about time as a resource. How do we spend it? And if you think about resources, resources are limited. I'm a econs teacher, right? So I will tell you that the ones are unlimited, whereas the resources that you have to fulfill those ones are always limited. And time is regarded as a resource. And so our perception of time is always something like, oh, I only have so limited amount of this. What am I going to do with it, right? If you even think that way, right? And therefore you are thinking of, I must make good use of my time, something I set aside. The perception is that of time that is of our controller, right? And that's the way we see it. And of course, there are also people like jokers like me who will say that, oh, I just spent 3 hours. This why I quote for my student first, because she was like, I spent 3 hours just watching TikTok, and that was my first introduction into TikTok. I was like, what? You're spending 3 hours watching a clock? Then okay, so it's actually something else. This was a few years back. And of course, we know there's Instagram, YouTube, and Netflix, and for you guys here, I hear gaming as well, right? A lot of things that do suck our time, and is an amazing ability of these media and these platforms that really suck our time without knowing it, right? Because it's designed that way. You have to recognize that it's designed to help you forget about time. Netflix makes it so easy to move from episode to episode that it's a way to just get you sucked in if you're not conscious of it. So these are the realities that we should be conscious of. And also when you transition into work, I thought I was talking to a crowd that may be somewhat unemployed also, but I realized that all of you actually have some form of employment. So it's just a good thing to recognize that these are the realities that we face also. Not say as a point that, we are never going to reach our ideal, but I think more as a recognition that this is the reality of where we are. And our perception of it doesn't have to be that, I wish I had more of this. I wish, I had the same flexibility of time before. I wish I had more time. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about recognizing that this is the current reality that we're in. So then how are we going to make use of it, right? So time is no longer as flexible as before. No matter what major you were in, right? Maybe apart from medicine, right? Or some other majors, that the time actually in university is very flexible, right? You may be busy, but you are flexibly busy, right? You can plan your modules, you can plan the time you're going to study, your friends. So I think that is something that we took for granted, or at least I took for granted, right? That I had that much time, and I'm an arts kid, right? It's 15 hours of lesson only, and then what am I going to do the rest of my life, right? Yeah, 15 hours is all of half a day. What's the rest of the time going to be spent on, right? So time was a lot more flexible. And you will feel that time is not your own as much as before. This is true because especially when you work, then I mean, for Dawn, you know you're in a public service, and so some of you have bosses to answer to, right? Then bosses will ask you for things. For some of you in a more time sensitive industry or workplace, then you're sometimes even at the beck and call of your boss, right? And so that's the reality that we are in. And I also recognize that time is no longer as common as before among your friends, because the reality that I recognize also is that I would meet friends, and especially CF, right? It was very easy, right? You have CG, you have fellowship teaching, and then you have all these kind of different things that enable you to just meet people constantly, and you meet people so much. You get the other issue of possibly like, oh wow, socially tired, right? It's a different issue altogether. But whereas now, right, in this time, actually it's not as easy to meet up with friends anymore, because your time is also different, and deliberately holding on to those relationships actually takes a bit more work than previously. So I find that my regularity of time previously was like, I meet you once a month is regular. Even actually once a month may sound a bit like it's a lot less than what I would prefer. But now meeting people like once every 3 months can be very regular. It can be a very good thing, because that's how time changes when you go into work, right? So how is it possible for us to think of time differently? And I think over here, what I'm sharing more is the approach that we take, and also a mindset of how we can then, a principle of how we can think about how we actually approach and think about time, right? And time, recognizing as in a Christian perspective, time is a gift, also a gift from God. I think the recognition also is that it's easy to take for granted that we are alive, right? And especially in this time, I think it's good to recognize that the time that we have, every day that we have, is a gift, right? And God gives us this gift that we can also give to other people. Then how do we use this gift that is given to us? Don talked about stewardship, so I wouldn't actually don't talk about a lot of things, so I won't go into that. But stewardship is something else as well. So it's a bit of a different mindset. And I think while the reality of time being 24 hours a day is going to be there, I think the perception that we have with regard to how if you think about time as leftover and as something that we have full control over, we'll have a very different mindset and a different sense of sanity also, as compared if we think about it as something that is a gift to us and it's something for us to steward rather than for us to own, right? I think that's helpful, a thought for us to consider. And I like how we should also think about ourselves as God's people, and how we use our time should be reflective of God's character and purpose for us. I do mean this generally speaking, and I also do mean this in a specific sense of yourself, right? But firstly, when we talk about the general idea of God's character, I think we see this best in Genesis 1. And I believe that some of you would have heard this also in sharing about work and why we work, right? We take on God's character, and actually there is a lot of overlap in the principle here, in that when we use our time, we also are using this time in reflection of the fact that we are made in God's image, and therefore the best way to use our time is the way that God desired for us to, and that's in taking on his character. So what is his character for? So if we look at Genesis 1 and we look at how he orderly created creation, and after that took time to rest, to enjoy in it, right? Not, he wasn't resting because he was like super tired, right? It's like, oh, so tired. He actually took time and rested because he enjoyed that creation, right? And the time that he was using was spent using this creative characteristic that he had also. So we are also made to be creative. We are also made to use our hands and when we do rest, it should give us the space to do these other things as well, right? So I also like that I would believe that you have read the document from Sean and the team about the fact that to teach us the number of days now, and to give us wisdom in that, and I think it's helpful, I thought, because when we are the age that we are at, right, even for me, I mean, I don't know about Michael, but from the age that we are in, it's easy to take for granted that, oh, I have this length of time of life to live. You don't think about death that much. In fact, it hardly comes to mind, right? And the reality is that when you actually think about death, and when you actually think about what you would be thinking back to about your life and on your deathbed, and you think about the time you've spent, I think there is a bit of a different nudge and a different perception that you would take, as compared to thinking that, oh, I have this whole like another 70 years to live, you know, and I think that causes us to take a bit more caution and care in the way we actually gift our time, right? So another thing, a few thoughts about time is that you will feel less control in your time in the future, and it's a reality that we recognize, and not to be unhappy about, but to recognize that, okay, so since it's going to be like that, then what will I do about it, right? But the recognition also is that it depends on how much of your time you wish to give. So in the context of work, right? As Don has also mentioned, the reality is that when you first go into work, you want to prove yourself, or you think that you have this whole bunch of energy, and then you're going to give everything, and you come to realize that trust me, okay, at 8 years of working, that's not going to hold. That's not very sustainable. Yeah, in fact, I had moments of burnt out because I mean, in addition to time, for me, it's also the emotional energy, lah, right? I think for me, my encounter came when I was managing students, and I have less sense of boundary of time with my students, because I always feel that I'll always want to give my all, and that could mean a bit literally, right? And so I think when it comes to a point where when my students were difficult and all that, and I felt I spent so much energy and time on this, then I was really bordering on burnout, lah, right? So I've come to also realize from the episode that you will feel obliged at the early stage of your working career to offer that much time because you feel a need to. But the recognition also is that there is actually some space for you to protect. And as Don has mentioned, this margin, right? This idea of it's not wrong to hold back some time because you want to be able to give more of yourself in future. So the Chinese saying goes, right? 休息是为了走更长的路. Or, you know, when you you have a bit of rest so that you are able to walk a longer journey. And I think that is very true as well. And I think it's recognition that, as I mentioned before, right, that when you are resting, you are also creating the space for yourself to recover, to be the better person for the next for whatever you're going to do next, right? So that is to some extent within your control, right? I recognize that I'm not talking like extremities like, wow, I'm going to tell my boss, no, I'm not going to do this for you. Obviously not, but the recognition is that there is some margin of space for you to be able to set parameters for. Another thing I also want to recognize is that how we use our time now, if you leave it unchecked, will be really how you use your time in the future. I was talking about this more in the context, I was thinking about this more in the context of people who haven't got themselves employed yet. But now that you get yourselves employed, and actually now that Sean did that little exercise where we listen to what we are doing, right? There is a reality there, right? That if we spend the day doing our work, then we go home, then we're like, I'm going to just watch my TikTok, Instagram, I'm going to play my games. Then this is what you're going to be doing for a long time. Trust me, with 8 years of working, this is what you're going to be doing if you leave it unchecked, right? If you don't stop yourself and wonder like, okay, actually, is this really what I want to do? Is there another way I can approach this? Right? Is there another way I can rethink how I spend this time? If you leave it unchecked, it will I wouldn't say come back to bite you, but you will come to have the reality that yes, maybe you could have done things a bit differently. And the recognition that your view of time will change as you move through different phases. One way of thinking about this is the recognition that for now, some of you may be attached or single, and therefore your perception of time is that I have time to do this kind of thing. When you move on to the next stage of life, when you get married, when you have kids, your perception of time will change. So previously, you thought that being productive with your time is to do, as Daniel was doing, courses, or it's good that you have different things that you can do. But the recognition also is that when you have kids, and I see this in my colleagues, actually all your time is for kids. And a lot of the time is necessarily for kids, especially at the early stages, like the first year to fourth year, like before primary school kind, because they are just needy and dependent that way is the reality of things. So I think if we take a longer view of time rather than just like this daily, like what am I going to do, but recognize that there's also phases in your life that where your perception of time will change, it will help you to recalibrate and to then not feel so bad about how you spend your time. For example, in this certain period where you are not married yet, maybe you want to be a bit more productive with that use of time, for example, in terms of your building up of yourself or what. But if you don't see yourself doing that in a certain period because of maybe your work also became too busy, then that's okay also. But then how do you calibrate yourself such that you still feel that you're fulfilling this purpose of how God intends for you to use your time, right? I also say this in light of the fact of work from home arrangements and COVID-19 arrangements, because many of you will probably hear this already, that it blurs your time, right? The time between work and not working is so blurred that it can be a cause of mental stress and anxiety for some of you. I mean, for those of us who already don't think that we end work until we sleep, and no issue lah, right? But I mean, for some of us who actually have clearer working hours and such, then it's helpful to think about what is your space to block off mentally from work and to protect for yourself as well. Okay. Another thing to think about is when we talk about this idea of not having time, I thought about this in light of the times where Don mentioned speaking to a friend in need when there's a need. Actually, I was thinking more of it in terms of when I attended wakes and funerals. And that is an indication of how it is possible when those things come, because of the nature of the event, you know how to put aside time to give time to visiting your friend, colleague who has experienced loss. And the fact that that can happen is indicative of the idea that when you say you don't have time, what do you actually mean? What actually are you prioritizing such that you say that you don't have time? And so I thought that was very helpful for me as well, because I face it in school. I mean, it's a different context, but you know, the idea that students always say they don't have time, whatever, then it's a different idea, but the parallel principle is the same. That if it's important enough to you, you will make time for it, right? And so this seeps into the idea of what are your priorities such that you want to spend the time on, right? So that's for me. I didn't have a lot to say, but I think, but so I was asked to also give some questions like 3 hours ago. So therefore, so therefore these are my questions. I think Dawn's questions is there's overlap, and I think the way she has phrased it is also very ideal also. So I think it's good to think about this. Yeah, and that's all from my side. Yeah.
Okay, I was right there. I was right to ask you because some of the stuff you say is some of the longer term view, right? And it's something that you won't realize it until you experience it at some level, right? Of course, Kevin is married, so some of these things become a bit more apparent. Because for many of us who is not, we are not attached, then it's kind of like your time is, you are the boss, like in that sense, unless someone pays you and buys your time from you, But if it's a partner, then you cannot just like, don't want. You cannot, right? You have to show a bit. Anyway, thank you for your sharing. Okay, so now we will have time for breakout room, and then we'll come back to Q&A, and I get to ask Kevin the question about rabbits that I really want to ask just now. I also have something for Dawn about her pots. Her pottery, not her pots. So I'll ask them later in the Q&A. Yeah, so I have made a quick summary of what they shared in real time. Okay, you guys can click on this link, and I'll make it open to everybody. No, I did not make a full summary. I just summarized what Don said with her points, and Kevin one is just I think since he says overlap, then I just share the afterthoughts. Okay, the what they call the questions that come with each part, which is the added thoughts at the end part. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so just look at the questions, and you can use them to discuss, or you can just share your own thoughts or concerns about your own way of spending time. Okay, so try to make this as relevant to yourself as possible. Okay, well, now is 12:08 on my side. I'll give you around 20 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, if you are bored, then you just come back to the main room. Okay, and then you just talk out from there. Okay, and then we have like 15 20 minutes of Q&A. Sorry that I overran a bit, but yeah. Okay, Michael, can you start the groups?
Okay, I open the breakout room now. So okay, let's just keep it at 22 minutes now. Okay. All right, see you guys.
Supposed to come back. Okay, no, we were supposed to come back. Why is my cap?
you never played your camera before. You're like, whoa, these are new functions.
No, I'm like, how come when I came back in, I'm like suddenly so zoomed in? I don't know. Never mind. Who is Benjamin? He wasn't here just now.
Hi, sorry, I'm supposed to in breakout room 1. Can you send me over?
We're supposed to come back here because
Oh, okay.
Dawn has to leave.
Yeah, sorry, because you dragged on. So okay, while you all think of your questions, right? From the sharing, you can refer to the document, the summary that I sent. I want to ask Kevin first. So on rabbits, right? Why do people always?
I can show you my rabbits.
Okay, please do.
Yes.
Why do people always have rabbits in pairs? Like, why not triplets? Why not four? Like all the rabbits owners always have 2.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask why not individually. Actually, for us is a very practical reason, because these jokers, they have a lot of droppings and they pee a lot. So this is, I don't know if you can see. I think I on the light.
I see something.
Are you gonna carry? Are you gonna carry it?
Oh, they don't like to be carried actually.
So
yeah,
sad.
they'll struggle when I carry them. This is Chicha. Chicha, right? And this greedy one is Okja. Oops, let me bring down the camera. There you go.
So fat. Oh, it looks like.
Oh, actually, Chicha is the one that's fatter. Yeah,
Oh,
she's overweight. I think we have fed her too much.
So if they have a lot of droppings, then why 2s? Why not 3s?
Huh? A lot of dropping eh. So there's every like 3 days I have to.
So why
clean
not
each way.
one?
Why not one?
Oh, why not
Yeah.
one? Oh, because they are social creatures. So what we read was that it's good for them to at least be in pairs, so that they don't only have human interaction, they also have each other. And especially for days where we are not around, so they actually have each other. Yeah. So we knew that we want 2. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Were they made? Or you all purposely buy the same gender?
Oh no, we
neuter.
Yeah. Yeah, because we were actually it's a bit for their health also. But we were scared of having like a litter of 12. So no, yeah. Because rabbits, they will multiply.
So do you refer to your rabbits together as Oji-cha?
No.
Okja and something.
Okja is out of the Korean movie. If you watch Netflix, Chicha is because she's bubble tea colored.
Yeah. Okay, noted.
Yeah.
Okay, have you all thought of your questions?
Oh, that was a time filler, right? So clever.
Okay, it looks like you all need more. I want to ask Dawn, right? Like, what happens if your pottery turns out badly? How do you feel? It's like, shit. Then how do you feel?
That's clutter.
Do you break them in anger, or do you just like,
Oh, I just feel that it's clutter. Yeah. Like, I have a lot of ugly things that I made in my first few months learning. Then like when you first learn, then you're very excited. Then you think, oh, this is like my prized possession. Then you realize they are very ugly and you do not want to keep them. Yeah, my brother asked me to just casually drop them on the floor accidentally. Because unfortunately, once fired, you can't really recycle that. Like if it's clay, you can still recycle it. But after it's fired, it's kind of just there. So yeah, I mean you feel a bit sad but I think like after a while you kind of recognize that it's like how a lot of things you cannot control anyway, right? So you like you just like, oh, it's okay. It's you just put it at the side, then you put it in the box and you hope to never see it again.
Oh, so you don't throw it away, you actually keep it?
At this point I haven't yet lah. Yeah, it's still kept hidden away from my side.
Don't you have a lot? Like I know friends who do this, right? And they have a lot of like.
Yeah, quite a lot. I try to give away a lot also.
Okay.
Yeah, more beautiful pieces. I don't give away ugly things.
Oh, you keep the ugly one, then the nice one you give. Oh,
yeah.
Can you crush them? Can you crush them and then turn it into a new one? Is it possible?
Technically you can, but it's quite difficult lah. Yeah. it's like how like whether you will crush your own plates at home and then make it a new piece a bit difficult.
Hey,
Yeah.
no, they kintsugi, right? It's like, oh, it's so ugly. That's
But they
kintsugi.
crush, then they piece together the same thing. The form is still the same. It doesn't change.
Oh,
It's just
you-
they put the gold ma.
okay.
But ugly is yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but it's now valuable, ugly and valuable, you know. Okay, anyway, it looks like somebody has a question, so please go ahead.
Oh, hi Don, I have a question for you. So you mentioned that like you gave the analogy of limited time, right? Like doing an exam. Like we don't have unlimited time to perfect our work and stuff. So like how do you deal with like that feeling of like imperfection? Like, okay, yeah, I just have to give it as it is and like I have to finish this work and then just give it. You know, do you like struggle with like imperfection?
Yeah. Actually I think that's something that I still constantly struggle with. Like I guess I'm not sure like what's your approach to a lot of things. But generally for me, I think like when I approach a piece of work, I aim quite high. So it's like I do like I like this thing requires 100%. I think my internal the way I plan, right, is like okay, they ask for 100, right? I give 120. And it's like, I mean, that's generally how I do things. Like, you know, maybe he's asking for this, but actually, I think he would want this. Maybe I should substantiate with another, like, stuff. So, I think, like, for me, it's also like constantly, like, fine tuning and adjusting that lah. So to recognize that it's not something that comes naturally to me, but the need to adjust, and I think that comes from realizing like two things. I think one is like realizing actually what does God ask of us when he says excellence? Like, like this excellence is not always something that is an objective standard. Actually, sometimes there's a lot of subjectivity, right? Giving your best is within that confines is also excellence. It's not always about, like, wow, the best it can be, because that means that we are not recognizing the constraints that exist. Yeah, but I think the second one is also asking myself, like, why do I feel that way? Like, like this desire to always give the best, right? Is it a matter of pride? Because I think sometimes a lot of it is related to pride. It's like I want to be known for my work in a certain way, and I want to get good review, and then like, I want to get good appraisal, and sometimes it's just like showing to yourself that you can do good work lah. Yeah, so it's like being aware of that, and then yeah, but I always tell myself these few days work hard is always to give less than you want to give. It's not a good analogy, but it depends on like what's your baseline. Like, cause my baseline is 120%. I tell myself every day 80% only. yeah, so that I can survive for the long term. Yeah, but don't take it as word. It's just for your own style. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Actually, I also have a follow-up question. How long did it take for you to realize this? And then like did you have to hit like a stage of burnout for you to realize that you had to like tone it down?
Actually, I think for me, like, yeah, it was not like burnout, but I think it was like a lot of like signs, yeah, like leading up to burnout, like being burnout. I think like for one, I think to share with you a very real situation that I'm in now. Like we are short of 2 headcounts, so we've been worked like super hard like this season. And then I realized, so I was just thinking, because we have a promotion cycle next year, so I was thinking, I was just thinking to myself like, I'll be quite upset if like I don't get promoted and my work's not recognized. But then I realized that I don't actually work to get promoted, right? But it's just this sense that okay, if I'm being worked like to the bone, right, then I kind of need a recognition for it. So I think that to me was a telltale sign of how it's bad, because I felt like if I'm working expecting this, right, then that shouldn't be how I work. Like I should work, to give my best in that. So that's how I know, okay, then I got to like kind of draw back. Yeah. So it's like I feel it's recognizing perhaps signs that you're exhibiting that are not typical for you. Like it's not like out of your character, and then that's when you realize, okay, that you gotta stop lah, and hopefully you recognize these red flags before you get a full burnout. Yeah, but I think Kevin mentioned that he got burnt out, right? So quite common though.
Yeah, because especially when you're younger and you have more energy lah, then you feel like you can do it, but you have to think for the longer game lah. And 6 years, 6, 7, 8 years in, I think I came to realize that there is a need to take a step back, and there's actually nothing wrong with, well, as Don says, the concept of 80%, because that is not 20%, right? You know, it's still a margin of like excellence that you are going for, but a sustainable one.
Okay. I want to ask a question, also in a more of a long-term view. Because I think maybe at the start of working life, most of us operate our time according to like demands. Oh, you need this, okay. Oh, I need to do this, okay. But at some point, it become like, should I really continue to do this? Right? Does this make sense? Does this worth it? So it becomes from demands to maybe a goal-oriented or a motivation kind of driven lah, oriented lah. Is that true? And for your at this stage of your life, like, do you I mean, besides the kind of like bopian lah, it's like I owe this to my employer kind of like constraints. Do you also see that shift in how you manage time? It's for both lah. So.
Don, you can go ahead. I'm trying to process the question. So you mean like instead of being subjected to like the demands and whims and fancies of people, I am more conscious of how I control my time? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So maybe I give an example, like for me, right? Like when I have nothing to do, right, I just go play Mobile Legends. Like it's not like it's a feeler lah, because there's nothing. I'm not trying to build a house. I'm not trying to save up my kids. You know, I mean, I just nothing to do lah, right? So it becomes just reaction to circumstance lah, you know. But maybe some of you all plan towards something, or you should plan towards something. Then you make your time work for your own goals and long term. Does it happen? Hey, Michael. Okay.
I don't really. I mean, I guess I feel like it's like whether you yourself have that kind of goals. Yeah, I think. I mean, I guess like. I'm okay. Wow, since it's an academic setting, but no, like I think like for social work, right? There's this sense of a life script, right? So this idea about how your life will proceed in its stages, or like. So I think it really depends on like your sense of how you think your life should be and what you want out of it. So I think that to me it kind of it serves as the motivator to change, to kind of motivate you to act in some ways. But I think when I first heard your question, Sean, I thought of the work, like I mean I think of it kind of like in a work context where like not just responding to when things come, right, but in that sense also recognizing that you kind of need to plan and have a stick in it. I think one is just like learning from your past lessons of like being burned once, but also realizing that it's for the long haul. Like I realized when I went to see my contract like on the system before, and then said my end date was like 9999. Like basically showing that like permanent staff, like you're not a contract staff. And then like it really hit me like, oh my goodness, like I could potentially be doing this like forever, like literally like not having it. And then you start to realize that okay, I must like have I cannot just go through the motions because it wears you out. Yeah, but I also think that as you work, you kind of develop like certain you get clearer understanding of your value of what's important to you, not just in terms of time or in a broad lifespan, but I think specifically with regard to work and how you see the balance, right? There's also a certain sense of value that comes out of it. So like for me, one value I've learned is that actually I care a lot about justice at work. So the sense of like recognizing the sense that work is distributed fairly and all that. So that's something I realize is important to me, and then that also affects how I then plan my time and negotiate accordingly, because that's a value that I became clear that it was something that I that was crucial to my enjoyment of work.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I fully concur with what Don said, and I think also will draw back on what I shared just now in that, you're right. There'll come a certain point in time where you're wondering like, why am I doing all this? Or like when you're at the beck and call of anybody around you, or you're just like floating a base on the circumstance, right? Then you will hit a point lah. I hope that you feel like, why am I doing all this? What meaning is am I getting out of all of this? So that's why I think in a morbid but yet in a helpful way, the idea of when you look back, what will be on your metaphorical gravestone, that in terms of how you have spent that time. I think about that because of the amount of time I spent watching Netflix. And I'm like, I finished all 10 seasons of Friends. So is that really something that I'm gonna be very proud of, or that kind of thing? So I think it's helpful when you think about it in that way. And this session has been a good form of reflection for me for that too, in that how when you look back to what's important to you, and you also go back and think about what you have been gifted to do, right? And then you think about what's important to you. If it's about building relationships, then how have you been doing that? And if it's about other issues, then how do you move that? So for me, for example, and I want to be clear about this, because for me, I don't mind spending that much time in work, because I feel that for me, my calling as a teacher is something I am fully devoted to, and I do not mind that kind of so-called lack of boundary lah. Although I've learned to have a little bit, but the idea that I am dedicating like 12 hours, 14 hours at the workplace is not a problem to me, because this is the way I want to dedicate my time to my students and my colleagues. Yeah.
I wish you were my teacher, bro. But okay, we don't live in that. We are living the same timeline, so that kind. Thank you. Anyway, any other has questions? Please go ahead.
I have a question. Yeah. I guess my question would be about rest. I agree with Kevin. Yeah, I agree with Kevin that rest is biblical in the sense that it's supposed to reflect God's character, because he rested to enjoy his creation. So I think there are two. Sorry, I think I'm lagging. Can you guys hear me? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
I think there are two extremes that we have to avoid in that we shouldn't rest in the sense of wasting our time in a way that is not reflecting God's character, but we should also I guess set some boundaries on how we should set some time for ourselves to rest. So yeah, like have the budget, right? So I guess is there any biblical guidelines or maybe mindset that we should have when we rest, so that we know that how we are resting is a good way of resting?
I say something first, then Don can share. I think one thing is okay, two things, right? One is honesty with yourself, and the other is a good monitoring of yourself. So, for example, when I say that this idea of enjoyment of creation, right? That's where when you're talking about watching Netflix or whatever, right? Or when you're playing games, right? Inherently in and of itself is not the problem, right? I think we can recognize that there is no wrong in it. But I think the problem comes is that when it becomes a bit too extreme, right? And then you can tell yourself, oh, I'm resting lah, play 5 hours of game, that's good rest, right? And so you have to be honest with yourself about what constitutes rest for you. 1-2 hours, sure, that makes perfect sense, right? But beyond that, then is it an honest assessment of what rest is for you? And I think your question is very pertinent in the sense that it's good to observe for yourself whether you actually feel rested after the activity. So when I say I watch TV, right, how I know it's not always the most helpful is because my eyes are very tired. Right, and it's just that practical thing, sometimes it's just these practical things that tell you that you the reason why I'm watching TV sometimes is because it's just the most brainless and it doesn't take up as much energy as anything else, but I also recognize that in and of itself it does take up some energy, right, in terms of the sleep it takes away, in terms of the time my eyes are like spending with this LED lights firing at my eyes, so that is not always the most helpful, right, and so you need to know for yourself how the activity enables you to do better the next day, right? And I think that is a helpful guide for me lah. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. I have a question. So, as what I posted.
Wait. Let Don respond to. Then after that, you ask him.
Ken.
I don't have a response. But I mean, I agree with Kevin a lot in the idea of self-awareness. Yeah, I think oftentimes we kind of reframe things in a way that is favorable for us in how we see things. But I think needing to know realistically how you spend the time is important. I think one guide that a very practical thing that for me I also see is whether I feel like any form of shame or guilt when I if I have to share this others. Like if someone asks me, hey, what you did yesterday, then I say, hey, actually I only spent 1 hour watching. Okay, but then I binge watch 10 hours. Then like you have a lot of you have a lot of shame. So I think it's little things like that. Because I think the truth is that I think we do know like what God desires. And I think like as we binge, right, sometimes we are aware subconsciously that it's not good, like it's not right. But then sometimes like just continuing on is the path of least resistance when you're in the moment, right? So it's like needing to know how to catch yourself and be aware of it. Yeah. But I'm honestly not the best with it as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Daniel, yeah, go ahead.
Right. It means that I'm really going to ask a question. So let's say that I practice going for outings after works and on free days. Is that really, really similar? And how time with family after school and work? Is this how to prepare us to spend time together, even on days which are busy, or even on Fridays when Saturday may not be a work day for majority of us and my future family?
So do you mean like is it spending time with people? Is it different from like spending time with yourself? Is something like that? Or
Whether it's spending time with myself or spending time with friends, then is this also a good way to simulate the time spent with future family, doing same things or even similar things in future, especially when school, let's say, ends, including CCA?
maybe the ones who are married and have kids can try to answer. I don't know, right? We are not.
That's only Michael. I only have rabbits.
Well, there was a time when you had no rabbits, right?
Rabbits not kids lah. They don't.
This one, Sean is cornering me one. Well, to me, I think my simple answer would be, I think you shouldn't. You don't have to have like a certain agenda for your rest day, even for outing or whatever. I think sometimes we live in a very pragmatic society, right? And everything has to have some utilitarian function or purpose. But I feel that, if you want to rest and if you need to go out for outing, even my wife and I are planning to go and watch Shang-Chi, maybe, I don't know, maybe tonight or tomorrow night. For what? What's the purpose? It's just to enjoy, like you don't have to have you don't have to have a certain agenda, because you need to rest, you need to enjoy creation and so on and so forth. So I think it's the same thing. Even with my children also, of course there are times that we take the children out, for outing, picnics, go to the zoo and so on, with a purpose, but it doesn't have to have agenda in a sense. Yeah.
I mean, that's really meant for relaxation.
Yep.
After stressful
Just
days of
simply
work.
for enjoyment. Yeah, I think
That's a
sometimes
perfect
we
idea.
just, as Christians, we feel too guilty if our reason for doing thing is really just for relaxation, and we don't have to feel guilty actually. Yeah.
Okay, I think there shouldn't be any more burning questions because that nobody burned with questions earlier except for me. So we will quickly move on to the breakout room so that Dawn can safely go for her next.
Sorry, I
appointment.
also need to go.
Like now.
I mean, since you have changed the timing like that, then okay lah. I think my margin is here. Yeah,
Wait,
because I got
okay.
nothing. I got something else to do. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
I say.
We all no problem. I just need to
Thank you, Kevin
brief.
and Don.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Okay. The next session is on 23rd October. Okay. The details we will just tell you over the group chats lah. Okay. So we just go the breakout room now. Okay.